These Roblox games were once the biggest on the platform, but they have all kind of died out. Today we're going to be looking at 5 popular games that have slowly been dying out. Let's talk about Doors, one of the most iconic horror games Roblox has ever seen. With over 6 billion visits, it should be thriving, right? Well, not exactly. At its peak, Doors was pulling in 60 to 70,000 active players at once, consistently. No updates needed, no hype required, it was just that good. But fast forward to now, and it's dropped to an average of just 10 to 15,000 players. That's a massive fall off for a game this big. So what happened? Let's rewind. Doors launched in 2021 and it exploded fast, hitting 1 billion visits in under a year. Its spooky atmosphere, clever monsters, and replayable rooms made it one of the most bingeable horror experiences on the platform. It even sparked a massive trend. Every horror dev on Roblox was suddenly trying to make their own Doors style game. But here's the issue. Behind this mega hit were just 2 main developers, Lightning Splash and Red Bulls. And while they're both insanely talented, they were just 2 people trying to manage a project that needed the support of a full studio. The community just kept begging for updates, new monsters, new floors, lore expansions, but they just couldn't keep up. It wasn't about skill, it was just too much for too few people. Months would go by between updates, hype would spike whenever they posted teasers, but with no consistent content, the player base slowly drifted away. Combine that with the rise of copycat games and even some fan-made better versions of Doors, and suddenly the original game didn't feel so fresh anymore. Even longtime fans started losing patience. It's not that Doors is bad, in fact, it's still one of the highest quality Roblox horror games ever made. But in fast-paced Roblox, you're not updating so often, players will vanish even if you made something legendary. And that's just a sad truth. Next up, we have another crazy story. Launched in early 2024 by a developer named Dixmean, A Dusty Trip started out like most indie games on Roblox. Slow and under the radar. But then something unexpected happened. TikToks about the game started blowing up. Clips of players crashing their cars, finding weird NPCs, or just messing around were going viral. And that momentum carried over into the game itself. What started with a few thousand players quickly jumped to 10,000, then 50,000, and at its peak, it was averaging over 75,000 concurrent players, eventually putting in 1.6 billion visits in just about 1 year. Nice. But all of that success, it wouldn't last. Month after month, the player count started to drop hard. What was once one of the biggest games on Roblox now struggles to break 10,000 active. That's an 80 to 90% decline. So what happened? To understand it, you first need to know what a Dusty Trip is actually about. You spawn in a desert, scavenge for car parts, build a janky vehicle, and drive as far as you can, while looting random buildings along the way. It's kind of like a Roblox version of the long drive. After the game was sold, monetization skyrocketed. Skins, loot crates, premium parts, everything felt paywall, and players weren't really having it. But let's rewind. When a Dusty Trip blew up, the devs were still pretty new to this. They were just a small group of friends who loved their long drive and wanted to make their own Roblox version of it. So when the popular dev named Jandel reached out and offered to buy the game for $20,000, they were stunned. Since they didn't have a way to receive the cash, they agreed on 5 million Robux instead, which is a life-changing amount for most people. But this is where things go wrong. After the sale, the game really started exploding. But with Jandel in control, the monetization ramped up fast. Tons of new game passes, crates, limited cosmetics, and more. While it helped make money, it also started pushing players away. Worse, the devs lost all their Robux. The account that had the 5 million got terminated, meaning they didn't just sell their game, they sold it for nothing. In TikToks, they've admitted to they regret the deal and they wish they could go back. Since then, they've teased they're working on a new project, maybe a spiritual successor to A Dusty Trip, but only time will tell if lightning strikes twice. This isn't just the first time that this has happened. We've seen tons of Roblox games get bought out only to fall off because of the aggressive monetization or lack of updates. Just look at games like Fish, another case of something unique becoming pay to win and losing its spark. Another reason, repetition. Even loyal players admit that after driving hundreds of miles and looting the same types of building, there's not much left to do. And while the devs have added new maps and new game modes, the core loop hasn't really changed. Also, once a game like this goes viral, it always spawns in clones. A bunch of knockoff versions, A Dusty Trip has popped up. And even though they're less polished, they're new. And in Roblox, new often beats good. So will A Dusty Trip ever make a comeback? Honestly, probably not. But the devs still have passion. If they've learned from this experience, their next project could be even better. Next up, Rainbow Friends. a game that came out of nowhere and took over Roblox. When it launched in mid-2022, nobody expected much. It was just another spooky story game at first glance, but the second players got their hands on it, something clicked. Within days, the game exploded, pulling in over 80 to 100,000 concurrent players, almost every night. And within weeks, Rainbow Friends hit 1 billion visits. It became the horror game for younger players with iconic characters like blue, green, orange, and that creepy brawler purple. There was something weirdly charming about it. Spooky, but not too scary. It was kind of like Poppy Playtime meets Piggy, and the community loved it. But then things went quiet. Chapter 2 didn't arrive for over a year, and in that time, the hype vanished. The game's daily player count dropped from over 80,000 to around 3 to 8,000. That's a drop of nearly 90%. And it all happened while players were waiting and waiting and waiting. So what went wrong? Rainbow Friends was created by Fragment Games, a small but passionate team. The first chapter was so successful that expectations for the second were sky high. But instead of building on the momentum, they disappeared. No sneak peeks, no teasers, no updates, just silence. And in Roblox, silence is deadly. By the time Chapter 2 finally released, a whole year later, it was too late. Many players had moved on. New horror games like Amanda the Adventurer, The Intruder, and A Dusty Trip had already filled in the gap. And while Chapter 2 wasn't bad, it wasn't groundbreaking either. It didn't reinvent the formula, it was just more of the same. Another factor, clone games. Once Rainbow Friends got popular, tons of knockoffs started flooding Roblox. Some of them with better mechanics, faster updates, and even crazier monsters. With so many alternatives, players stopped checking back. Rainbow Friends didn't fail, it just froze. And in a platform that moves as fast as Roblox, standing still can be the same as moving backward. Will it come back? Maybe. Fragment Games still has the power to revive it, but only if they listen to the community and bring something truly new to the table. Until then, Rainbow Friends remains another sad example of how even the biggest games on Roblox can fall just as fast. Now let's talk about a game that literally had Roblox running for their lives. Evade. At one point, this game was everywhere. TikToks, YouTube edits, stream highlights. Evade took over the platform with its mix of chaos, speed, and memes. With over 1.7 billion visits and concurrent players counts reaching 100,000. It was one of the fastest growing games Roblox had ever seen. But today, it barely averages 5 to 10,000 players. So what happened? Evade was built on a simple but genius formula. Run for your life from Nextbox. Random meme faces and cursed PNGs while working together to survive each round. Combine that with fast-paced movements, emotes, revives, and hilarious ragdoll physics, and you had a perfect recipe for viral content. And for a while, it worked. But just for like Rainbow Friends and so many others, Evade suffered from one thing: burnout. The devs, Hexagon development community, released a ton of updates early on. New maps, new bots, cosmetics, but eventually it slowed down. And the community, they started getting tired. The game didn't evolve, it stuck to the same formula: spawn, run, die, repeat. And as attention spans shrunk, players needed something more, something fresh. On top of that, Nextbot trend started dying. At first, they were funny, screaming meme faces chasing you around, but as more games copied the style, it started to feel played out. You can only run from Sanic and Obunga so many times before it loses its spark. Another thing that hurt Evade, poor optimization. As more maps and assets were added, performance started tanking, especially on mobile. Lag spikes, bugs, and long load times started popping up. And for a game where speed is everything, that was a major issue. The community asked for a change, and for the most part, they didn't get it. Eventually, players stopped logging in. Evade isn't dead. Not completely, but it went from cultural phenomenon to a forgotten tab in your favorites list. And unless the devs reinvent the game loop to bring back something truly new, it may never climb back to where it once was. To wrap this up, let's talk about a game that used to be unmissable, Funky Friday. Back in 2021, this game dominated Roblox. Inspired by Friday Night Funkin', Funky Friday brought back that same rhythm battle energy, and it blew up instantly. At its peak, it was averaging 75,000 to 100,000 players every single day. Servers were packed. Leaderboards were competitive. You couldn't scroll YouTube without seeing a Funky Friday 1v1 montage. It was the game for music fans, tryhards, and content creators. But now, it's just sitting at just a few thousand active players. A number that keeps on dropping. So, what happened? At first, the updates were consistent. New songs, new animations, and tons of community engagement. the devs, Light Interactive, were riding the rhythm wave hard, but eventually, things started to slow down. The rhythm game trend faded fast. FNF stopped updating, other games started making the spotlight, and then the updates for Funky Friday just stopped. For months, players were left waiting with no communication, no sneak peeks, no teaser, nothing. And as the silence grew louder, the player base got quieter. To make things worse, the competitive scene fell apart. Scoreboards were overrun by cheaters and macros. And since the game never got anti-cheat updates, it turned off even the most loyal players. The magic was gone. There were rumors of a massive revamp, something to bring Funky Friday back to life. But to this day, nothing has really changed. And most people have moved on. Some games on Roblox go out with a bang, but Funky Friday, it just faded. And that's a sad truth. Roblox is fast. One moment, a game is everywhere, and the next, it's buried at the bottom of your favorite games, forgotten. From A Dusty Trip to Doors, Evade, Rainbow Friends, and now Funky Friday, we've seen how some of the biggest titles can fall off, whether from burnout, bad monetization, or just poor timing. But here's the thing, these games meant something. They shaped trends, built communities, and created memories, even if it was only for a moment. So maybe they're not really dead, just resting, waiting for their next big comeback.